Habitat, we do have a unique volunteer opportunity. The fact that they are so collaborative and there is like a group doing it together, whereas, maybe some other volunteer opportunities, you might be the only volunteer that day. You might be the, working kind of, and it's still wonderful. You're still part of an organization. That's why it's so important for organizations to make you feel welcome and to find opportunities that are really helpful and do make a difference.
Welcome to the Lead with Heart podcast, the podcast for people who believe compassion and impact go hand in hand. Great leadership isn't just about results. It's about how we uplift others, how we make a difference, and support our communities. If you're looking for insight on how to lead with empathy and make a real difference, this podcast is for you. I'm your host, Moryah Jackson, and I'm so glad you're here. Today's conversation is one you won't want to miss. I'll be talking to Marli Willard, and we're going to talk about volunteering and how serving others makes a difference. Let's get started. Hello, Marli. Thank you so much for joining us on the Lead with Heart podcast. I'm so excited to talk to you.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Wonderful. Well, let's jump right in. I always love to hear about guests. So tell me a little bit about yourself and some experiences you've had along the way.
But yeah, so I am the volunteer programs manager with Habitat for Humanity of the Central South Carolina branch. And I do have my social work licensure. I actually started as a volunteer coordinator after I graduated from grad school with my social work degree. I started as a volunteer coordinator for a sexual trauma center in Anderson. And from there, I ended up becoming a therapist with them for their child advocacy center. So I worked with children for a few years. And then mental health. I worked with mental health for a year before coming back to Foothills Alliance as the volunteer coordinator, because that's something that I really enjoy doing, is working with volunteers and people who are passionate about, help getting out in the community and helping others. So when I did end up moving down to Columbia to be closer to family, actually, it was very natural to find the volunteer coordinator position, here at Habitat for Humanity. And started with working as the volunteer programs manager with the Habitat for Humanity here, which has been a lot of joy, because something that I said before is that I feel like we get to see the happy side of social work here as we work with, our homeowners, and we get to see their dreams of homeownership come to fruition.
That is wonderful, Marli. It is obvious that you have a heart of service. And so I'm just curious, where does that come from? Did you volunteer when you were younger? What motivated you to get into volunteer services?
My very first real volunteering experience is I volunteered at a hospice center, which I can't even remember the name of the place at this point, but I was in high school. And I used to go and visit with the residents at this hospice center. And then when I graduated high school, I actually ended up volunteering for our zoo, Riverbank Zoo. Because I love our zoo that we have here. And after that, I would volunteer at Palmetto Lifeline. It's a animal shelter in the area. And then when we moved to Greenville, I volunteered a little at the animal shelters there. So a lot of my volunteering has actually been around animals. But I did really feel like, doing volunteer work, it was helping a cause that I cared about. I'm still an animal lover to this day. So I do feel like it's really important to get out there and help causes that, like I said, that are near and dear to your heart.
Wow. Talk about being alignment with Lead with Heart. You really want to serve others. And I mean, that's the main thing when we're on this podcast. We want to talk to people about how do you make a difference in your community? How do you demonstrate compassionate leadership? And what better way than to get involved? I commend you for volunteering with hospice when you were in high school. I mean, how did that opportunity come up? I was surprised to hear that. I was expecting to hear you volunteer in something else, but not hospice. What motivated you to start volunteering there when you were a high school student?
Oh goodness, I really have to think back to remember the real answer there. I remember at the time um, so my grandmother lived with us when I was growing up, and she passed away when I want to say 13. And I feel like I was missing that connection to like an older generation because she was the only grandparent I had. Um, and so I feel like from that experience, I started asking about, well, are there populations like that? I'm sure I didn't word it like that, but are there populations like this that I could volunteer with? And that led me to talking with, I think it was our youth pastor, it was someone at our church who recommended this particular hospice center for me to volunteer at, and they welcomed me with open arms. So I volunteered there for a couple of years after my grandmother passed away.
Mhm. Wow, I love that story. That is so meaningful. Just the intergenerational connection. I mean, the fact that you said you missed that connection, you lost your only grandparent, and you really took grief and turned it into love. I'm sure those residents absolutely loved having you around them, and it was a mutually beneficial relationship. So that's powerful. Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for doing that. I think that's a wonderful way to develop meaningful relationships and connection and just learn. There is so much wisdom. So that's really powerful.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I love that you again have a history of volunteering and volunteering is all about making a difference in the community. I would love to hear, how do you define community, or what does community mean to you?
To me, community is a group of people. It can transcend geographical location. It can be part of a geographical location. That's really a group of people with either shared interests, shared needs, um, that can come together and really work together, share information together, help each other, really like a collaborative space, depending on what that looks like. And it could be a community of a neighborhood, for instance, but to call it a community is a little bit bigger than just we all live here in this area together. To me, to be a community, it's that collaborative approach and helping each other, and like I said, sharing information and being there to support one another. And especially with the age of the internet, it can, like I said, surpass geographical location. Even something as, you know, uh, benign as like, I love horror, so I'm part of a horror community online, or I love to, play games. So I'm in certain gaming communities. I go to Firefly. I go to one of our local gaming places pretty much every weekend, and I feel like a big part of the community there is because we're sharing interests and we help each other out sometimes. And yeah, so I think community is more about people coming together and really being able to work together and share those interests and help each other.
That is a great definition. I think our listeners really benefited from that because really it could be anything. It's not just geography, it's not just your neighborhood. It's a group of people who come together with a shared interest and a common goal. And so that was a wonderful definition, which, makes me think about, again, humans and human nature. We are social creatures and community is important to us. I absolutely love that you have that social work background. Can you talk about the benefits of being in a community and having community support?
Yeah, so I think it's very important for us to be involved in some sort of community. I know it's easy this day and age to kind of kind of sequester yourself at home when once you get off work, maybe you want to come home and relax. But finding, other people with those shared interests, it feeds your soul. It makes you feel like part of something bigger. Having opportunities to communicate together and um, you know, do interesting things together. And I feel like I feel like we all do need that, like you said, as social creatures, and none of us can really fully succeed as an island on our own. So I think also just having that space of people that can support each other and build each other up and help each other as we need it is important.
No, I think that's great. And for our listeners, I think it was so powerful for you to say that no one can succeed alone. We're in a very individualistic culture. And sometimes you think of one person or the Lone Ranger or the individual, but the reality is someone helped you along the way. And more than likely, you've helped someone else along the way as well. And I think that's great that you said that, no one succeeds alone. No one's on that island alone. And so I think that's a very powerful message, especially in this day and age. Again, it's easy to just want to, go home or log in or disconnect, but being engaged in a community is good for your health. It's good for your physical health. It's good for your mental health. And again, you've worked in that space for so long. So I'm sure you know better than anyone how important being in community is.
Yeah, absolutely. But I know, like I mentioned, sequestering yourself at home. I know it's so easy, but it really is. It does end up draining you.
hmm So you have years of experience coordinating volunteers. That is not an easy job. So I love that you're committed and dedicated to helping volunteers connect to a mission. What advice would you give to our listeners about finding out how to volunteer or how to be a good volunteer?
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So I think, you know, reaching out to people already in your community. One reason it's great to build communities, but like how I got involved with the hospice was reaching out to people I already knew and asking around. But also if like when I got involved with the animal shelters, it's something that I knew that I care a lot about. I know that we have an overpopulation of dogs and cats that need homes. So really figuring out what is something that I care about and am passionate about. And again, the age of the internet makes it so easy to go out and research like what are places that are doing this and find somewhere that has a mission statement that you can really get behind and say, oh, I do care about that. I care about that a lot. And then reaching out, I think a lot of times people are scared to make that initial jump to try something new, to meet new people, to maybe this volunteering won't be right for me. And what if it's a terrible experience? People have all sorts of things going on, but just making that initial first reaching out and talking to somebody, probably a volunteer coordinator, about what those volunteer opportunities look like and how you can be the best help to them. I think that's just the big thing is making that initial, reaching out.
Wonderful. I love how you talked about figuring out something that you care about. When you're passionate about something, you're more motivated to get involved. And as you said, in the age of the internet, it's amazing how much information is at our fingertips. So a quick Google search, around an interest could probably connect someone to a program or organization or a community of people that are already working on that issue. So, Marley, you've been a volunteer coordinator. Do you have any heartwarming stories that stand out or just some impactful moments that you can share with our listeners?
Yeah, so we do have our builders club, and that is a group of people that come out pretty much every single week and help us build houses. Um, and some of them have been working with us now for 5+ years. And the last time I, was talking with them and, asking, like, hey, what brought you to us and what's kept you here? And the thing that I heard from pretty much every single one of our Builders Club members was the fact that they felt like they were part of, uh, uh, to use this word again, part of a community. They're such a close knit group, and they feel like we accepted them, and they do have this like fellowship together, and that's a word a few of them actually used was it's like they fellowship together while they're working. And so that's kept them and that's gotten us some more members, just from making people feel supported. And that they are doing something that's really important to our homeowners, for our homeowners and the greater community, and feeling like they're part of a group of people doing this work. So that was something I really loved to hear, that they all, like, so many of them use the word fellowship, and they're part of this group doing something bigger. And I think that's just a wonderful volunteer experience.
Now, I think that's a powerful story, and it's very impressive that they volunteered so long. I just think that's amazing. You mentioned fellowship when you talked about the Builders Club, and the reason that they continue to come back and they've been involved for so long. Part of that was the fellowship, and part of that was being. And so, Marley, in terms of the Builders Club, you mentioned two things that bring them back. It's the fellowship of, with the community, and also being a part of something bigger. How does volunteering together on something like a habitat build bring people together? Have you seen organizations say, because of this build, we feel closer? Because of this build, our relationships are stronger?
Yeah, absolutely. Some of the church groups, especially that we have, they said it really helped solidify some of their friendships and their bond, because, maybe it's someone that they see in church every Sunday, but they don't necessarily have the opportunity to talk to. Maybe they're in different Sunday school classes, or, and this really brought them into a space where they're communicating all day long, working on this build. So that's been something that's been really beneficial I've definitely heard from our church groups. Another one that I think of is some of our banking organizations. They're coming from sometimes different branches, and sometimes it's people that don't get to collaborate very often. And again, just communicating all day. Sometimes they volunteer multiple days, which could be really helpful to build like a sense of a team, because some of them are working together just at different branches. So really getting them, you know, familiar with each other, and how they work together, I think is really beneficial. And I do think with Habitat, we do have a unique volunteer opportunity. The fact that they are so um, collaborative, and there is like a group doing it together, whereas, maybe some other volunteer opportunities, you might be the only volunteer that day. You might be the, working kind of, and it's still wonderful. You're still part of an organization. That's why it's so important for organizations to make you feel welcome, and to find opportunities that are really helpful and do make a difference. But I do think that this is a little bit more unique in that groups can volunteer together and get more familiar with each other and kind of do that team building.
I absolutely love that. So, the whole purpose of doing this podcast was to talk about compassionate leadership, bringing people together, doing the right thing. And from a lead with heart perspective, volunteering is a wonderful way to build community. It's a wonderful way to build team. And there is something special about actually doing something physical together. It's a great memory. It's a great learning opportunity. When you're out there, you have a chance, just to talk about things in life. And it's just amazing what you can learn when you're building something with someone. I also do want to mention one of the things that I love about Habitat Builds in particular. We'll have homeowners out there. You might have a CEO out there. You might have someone else that's leading a team, or someone working on the front line. And it's amazing how when you're out volunteering, everyone has a hammer. Everyone has safety glasses and, you're all on this, level playing field. They're just rich, beautiful conversations that come up when you're like, hey, we're all just people here who want to make a difference.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. That brings me to kind of a funny story that happened fairly recently with one of our volunteer groups, when the boss man arrived. Everyone's like, "Oh, the boss man's here! The boss man's here! Everyone be on your best behavior!" And they were kind of joking, but he was immediately like, "No, I'm not the boss man today. I'm not the boss man. I'm just working with you guys. The construction guys are your bosses for the day." And I thought that was a really fun way that they interacted, and a good connection between, the as they put it, the boss man and the group. So yeah.
That's a really good story. I love that. And again, we're all people. we're all here. We want to make a difference. We're in the community. And the word that I like to use is we're all neighbors. We're here building our community and we want our community to be strong and safe and healthy and vibrant. So that's really exciting. I do want to focus a little bit more on you and your leadership development and your leadership journey. Have you learned any lessons along the way working at different nonprofit organizations, working towards your master's degree? What are some of the things you've learned about leadership?
So the big thing that I kind of ended up taking away from even just my first experiences leading volunteers was leading with encouragement, leading with making sure people do feel heard and valued and thanked, and just really encouraged to, do the actions that, we're hoping to elicit from our volunteers, which is so important, especially when working in fields like with the Sexual Trauma Center, where maybe it's a little bit, it can be daunting and scary to be a volunteer in that position, going to the hospitals when somebody's at their lowest. So making sure just the constant encouragement and thanking and praising, as appropriate. I think that's a big thing for me is, yeah, just making sure that our volunteers feel valued.
Mhm. I absolutely love that, Marley. I think that is something our listeners can use. And when you talk about leading with heart, it's so important to recognize people, recognize their value, recognize their contribution. And so often we focus on like what's wrong or we focus on the negative things. And I firmly believe that everyone needs encouragement, everyone needs support, and everyone needs to know that they're making a difference. So I think that's a very powerful lesson that you learned early on. So thank you for sharing that. That's something everybody can really start applying immediately. And it makes me think of this concept. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, talking about filling your bucket. Have you filled your bucket today or have you filled someone else's bucket? And it costs us nothing to compliment somebody or recognize something good that they've done. So that's a really good one. Thank you for sharing that. Um, I also want to know, in your experience, do you have any tips for volunteers? If there are listeners out here who maybe they've been hesitant to go volunteer, they have some issues that they're interested in their community, but they just haven't taken that next step. Do you have any tips or words of encouragement for them?
Yeah, the very first thing that comes to my mind is, and I mentioned earlier, just go ahead and make that initial contact and reach out, because that doesn't lock you, that doesn't force you to volunteer. It doesn't, you can go and ask for volunteer information from the vast majority of organizations that utilize volunteer help are going to have someone who's going to be able to give you more information. Um, and if you need to look at a few different places and information gather and decide on one from there, that's fine. We're not going to attack you for not volunteering with us. So yeah, just making that initial contact, I think, is really the biggest thing. I think so many people are just afraid to jump right into the volunteering and into the unknown and how they're going to, how they're going to feel about the volunteer experience. So, yeah, places will be really happy to explain what our volunteer opportunities look like and what those will be like. So yeah, that initial contact, I think, is just the big thing.
No, I love it. It's great. Sometimes the hardest part is to just get started. So, just we encourage you to just take the leap, make the first step, and then, go from there. So that's really good advice. And also, I want people to think about, you might have marketing experience or finance experience, but nonprofit organizations can utilize all types of expertise. So maybe there's something that you do. Excuse me, maybe there's something that you do in your day-to-day job or something that you might not think is unique because you do it all the time, but that's a skill that could really benefit a nonprofit organization. So there's so many different ways to be involved. And then I also love that you said, you may be entry level, go volunteer at an organization and develop that skill set. And you can also become an expert. One of the things that I absolutely love about Habitat for Humanity is you don't have to have any construction experience whatsoever. And we have a phenomenal team that will teach you how to do everything you need to know to build a house. And so I think that's pretty impressive.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I think also, you may build skills from your job that you can also use to volunteer, but also a lot of people do have hobbies that require skills outside of their jobs. And a lot of those things you can then use those skills to volunteer, and so then you're doing something a little bit different than what you're doing for work, and continue to build your hobby skills too. Growing up, this kind of goes back to me talking about, volunteering at the animal shelter. Growing up, my family actually bred dogs and cats, so I had a lot of experience pretty much my entire life training like dogs. So, it made sense to take this hobby skill and to put it to use over here in a shelter.
I do want to say I absolutely love that you said you had experience training dogs. We're a family, like, we love to go and get rescue pets. And so I'm very appreciative that, when we've gotten dogs, they already know how to play fetch. So thank you. Like, you're one of those people that is teaching. And so yes, I'm on the other side of it. So I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
So Marli, I absolutely love that you on a regular basis are, again, you're in a leadership role, helping volunteers connect. They're able to take what they care about and do something meaningful in the community. And so you are literally leading hundreds of people each year. Do you have any tips for our listeners? I know you mentioned encouragement and motivation, but what are some other practical leadership skills, just working with a group so large on a regular basis, that you've learned and you can share?
I think a big thing when working with groups is really building the relationship with the leader, with the leaders of those groups. For instance, like I know a lot of the pastors of the churches that come out to volunteer with us. So really building that relationship, because that will help them also encourage their own members of their team, and feel good about encouraging them to continue volunteering with us. And then on a more practical sense, also learning how to be organized, because that is something that I had to learn how to organize larger groups better when I was coming from a more volunteer coordinating position where maybe I was coordinating individuals on a daily basis. We had to have volunteers every single day. But that was a little bit different than, say, a volunteer coordinator working with large groups of people all fighting for scheduling different days and whatnot. So yeah, learning how you're going to organize what that looks like and how that's going to work for you, because different people, different organization styles work differently. So figuring out what's going to work for you to do that.
That's powerful. I love that you talk about relationships. Everything is about people. And so you really have to listen. You have to build trust. You have to follow up. You have to stay in touch. And it just takes time. And so I think those are all good tips for our listeners as they're learning how to lead with heart and compassion. And really, Marli, you have to connect so many dots. You have to say, okay, what is this group's particular need? How do they want to help? How does it fit here? And that alignment is so important. And of course, we want them to have a good experience and continue to come back. So that's awesome. Thank you. That's really, really good information to share. You have really done a lot of different things at organizations, also with your degree. What would you tell your younger self? Do you have any reflections that, you're wiser now, you've had some experience? What would you tell your younger self?
I think for me personally, my younger self needed somebody to tell her it's okay to just be you. Because I definitely struggled. And I know a lot of younger people have similar struggles where they're like, no, I need to be a certain way. I need to present a certain way for this, that, and then I being like overly self-conscious about myself and who I am and my hobbies, where it's like, no, just be yourself. Like if you could just be genuine, it is easier to build those relationships and make people, feel your, the trust in what you're saying, and to be able to form kind of friendships and relationships. Um, so I think that's a big thing. It's okay to be you, be confidently you, and that's important.
Wow, that is powerful. And again, talking about lead with heart, you have to be authentic. Authenticity is so critical. And I mean, you said it, when you're comfortable with who you are, it helps build stronger relationships and people trust you. So that's very powerful advice. And I'm just a little bit curious to know, where did you get this idea of who you thought you should be?
Um, I'm gonna be honest, I'm a bit of like a nerdier person. Like I've had the nerdy interests, and growing up and hearing that those interests were like, nobody wants to hear about that. Like, you have an insect collection? Okay, that's weird. Like, so I
Nothing.
think
That's cool.
really yeah, yeah, and I mean, it's, the different interests that people have, it is really cool, and we should be embracing that. And but I think just growing up with these preconceived notions of what makes someone like even the internet used to joke like 10 years ago now about adulting and how you're supposed to be an adult and how you're supposed to present as an adult. It's like, no, it's okay. It's okay to, have your horror novels on the shelf behind you, and be that unique individual that you are, because everyone has, different interests and creativity and personalities. And I'm never gonna be the calm, soft-spoken person. And even going into when I worked as a therapist for a little bit, a lot of the therapists I knew were like more calm and quiet, and that's never gonna be me. So yeah, I think just the way that people kind of approach those interests growing up and giving me those preconceived notions, it's like, no, it's fine, it's fine.
I absolutely love that. And I definitely think that's part of growth. And so many people struggle with what they're supposed to be or what success should look like. So I'm just happy to hear that that's something that you've grown comfortable with. And also to share that as, something to help other young people, because again, that's still an issue. We have so many images, whether it's media, TV, Instagram, of what we should be. And really, you should just embrace who you are, and be true to yourself, and that makes such a big difference. And of course, it definitely helps with mental health as well, because you're not trying to change or fix or do something that's not natural or comfortable to you. So I appreciate that. That's really good. So, Marley, based on your experience working with volunteers, what do you think motivates people to serve others?
Yeah, so I think that people, choose missions that they care about based on their past experiences. Just like what I had mentioned with when my grandmother passed away, and I suddenly had this desire to, work with a similar population as herself. Or, I saw, breeders with dogs and cats, and I was going, oh well, there's a lot of dogs and cats that need homes though, and so I started thinking a lot about that, and so that's what drove me to serve, dogs and cats, and try to help them become adoptable so that the problem could diminish. So I think people are really seeking out volunteer opportunities and the opportunity to serve others based on, their own life experiences and maybe struggles that they themselves have gone through. If somebody saw how expensive housing is and they've struggled with it in the past when maybe they were younger, then working to on a mission that's trying to build up affordable housing is something that they're gonna be drawn to that. So I think it's, people who really want to, and especially people who really want to pay it forward. Like my grandmother was a huge influence on my life as a child. I always say she was a third parent to me because she did live in the home. She did help raise us. Um, so really paying that forward, she helped me so much to be who I was as a person. I want to, help people like her who maybe are struggling with end of life care. Um, so I think it's based on people's experiences really drives what they're passionate about and what they care about.
Oh, that's powerful. Lived experiences definitely impact a person. And so it's great when you can take that and do something good with it. I absolutely love that you mentioned the concept of pay it forward. I think that's a wonderful concept. And I definitely wish more people would pay it forward. And it's a beautiful example of how you can lead with heart. So thank you for sharing that. So often we hear about people being divisive, and I firmly believe volunteering brings people together, and it's so powerful to see people from so many different backgrounds working toward a common goal. What are some of the things that give you hope right now, Marley?
Well, especially while working with Habitat, one of the biggest things is seeing the ribbon cutting ceremonies, being able to see our homeowners' dreams come to that fruition and know that, I helped be a part of this, and to see these communities really develop. I've loved seeing, like, right now we're currently working on these three houses side by side. Those homeowners have gotten to know each other really well, and seeing that's bringing it back to, talking about this sense of community, and also knowing that there are so many people out there who do want to help and, do want to be part of a greater mission, than just themselves and their families. That's so inspiring, and it does give me hope, the general hope in humanity, that there are people that really care so much to give their time up to help others. I think that's just inspiring, and that gives me hope.
I absolutely love that. I think that's beautiful. So often the news focuses on the negative, but when you're on the ground in local communities, I see something different. I see people helping one another. I see neighbors rolling up their sleeves. I see care, and it's a very beautiful thing. So, Marley, thank you so much for joining us on the Lead with Heart podcast today. I know our listeners were able to get a lot out of this episode, and the main thing that I hope our listeners leave with is, if you're thinking about doing something and you've been hesitant to take that next step, just pick up the phone, send an email, get involved. And there are people like Marley everywhere who are willing and able and anxious to help you get connected to something that really makes a difference. So thank you so much, Marley.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you again for having me.
You're welcome.